are we good? Okay. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I know, what a wonderful Wednesday. I hope everybody had a good time last night, and feel free to go recruit some more individuals to come on and attend. So, good morning. My name is Colonel Jessica Hoagland. I will be your moderator this morning for this amazing panel on contested logistics, partnering to win. I'm the division chief for Global Logistics at Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network, also known as JFHQ DODIN. The distinguished panel with me today represents organizations from a variety of cybersecurity and operations. First, Brigadier General Heather Blackwell, who is the Deputy Commander for JFHQ DODIN. General Blackwell leads command and control of the Department of Defense Information Network operations and defense cyber operations, internal defense measures, synchronizing Department of Defense, a lot of defense, information network defense actions, along with synthesizing global intelligence sharing to deter adversary attacks, to enable power projection, freedom of action, and mission assurance across all warfighting domains. Welcome, General Blackwell. Next, Mr. Nicholas Hull, who is the Deputy to the Commander of the United States Cyber Command's Cyber National Mission Force. As the Deputy to the Commander, Mr. Hull supports the Cyber National Mission Force Commander in leading 2,000-plus member organization responsible for planning, directing, and synchronizing full-spectrum cyberspace operations to defend the nation from foreign malicious cyber actors. Welcome, Mr. Hull.
Yeah. You have a standing ovation out there.
Finally, our third panel member is Mr. Oliver Pandian, who is the Cybersecurity State Coordinator for Maryland Region 3 within the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. As the Maryland Cybersecurity State Coordinator, he serves as the lead federal advisor for cybersecurity and cyber incident response coordination to leaders across the Maryland state government and leaders within counties, cities, and private industry. He builds strategic public and private sector relationships, supports entities with preparation, response, and remediation efforts related to cybersecurity risks and incidents, facilitates cyber threat information sharing, supports cybersecurity exercises and training, and raises awareness of financial, technical, and operational cybersecurity resources available to state, local, tribal, territorial governments. Welcome, Mr. Pandian. Our adversaries seek to retrieve our critical information and data to advance their technology faster and reduce our capability to sustain our forces globally. The sharing of cybersecurity best practices and standardized collaboration will help to collectively counter this threat. The securing of global logistic data is critical to ensuring global force projection and freedom of maneuver. Cybersecurity should be at the forefront of all departments and companies. Enhancing the cyber resiliency of global logistics systems is a continuous process that requires commitment, investment, and collaboration. As adversaries evolve their tactics, the Department of Defense and industry must stay ahead with innovative cybersecurity solutions. This panel considers cyberspace-enabled activities in support of global logistics in a cyber domain assumed to be contested. Deterrence and de-escalation of adversaries are features of cyber resiliency in a secure, well-operated, and defended Department of Defense information cooperating with adjacent and supporting commercial network segments. The first question I'd like to offer this panel today is, how do we increase the sharing of cyber threat information to industry and from industry? I'd like to offer this to Brigadier General Blackwell first. Ma'am, over to you.
Awesome. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Cool. Hey, so just to, that was a lot of words, and is anybody taking notes on how many times you said defense? Okay, right. So to kind of put in perspective, though, as the Deputy Commander for Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, we've got an awesome booth back there, so please go visit it. My job really is to secure, operate, and defend this thing we call the DODIN, the DOD's Information Network. It is, as you'll hear General Hawk and General Skinner talk about, the third largest network in the world. So being able to defend that and secure it is a big feat. But again, my job kind of stops where the DODIN stops. I don't secure into commercial infrastructure. I don't secure into foreign allies and partners. So I'm excited about this panel because we kind of have the broad range. If you go through a global logistics mission thread, of the mission thread starting on the DODIN, traversing through commercial companies and into foreign ports and airports. So I'm excited about the dialogue we're going to have on this panel today. The most important and most fun part too is the questions that we'll get from you guys. So please ask us questions as we go through this. So you threw the first question to me, which was information sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a fun one because from a DODIN perspective, we look at all source intel. We have a lot of intel from commercial companies that bring in. There's a lot of intelligence that we get from NSA and a lot of intelligence that we get from other sources, and we pull that together and we share that as much as we can at every classification level with what we call our 45 DAOs. The DAO is that DODIN area of operation. Again, the DODIN is a huge network. I can't synchronize command and control of this massive network all from one point. So we rely on different commanders who own different segments of this terrain. So sharing information with those DAO commanders, let's think of DECA. Let's think of other agencies that are out there that are on the DODIN. Ensuring that they understand the why I'm asking them to secure pieces of hardware, why I'm asking them to upgrade and get rid of tech debt. Understanding the why is extremely important. That comes from intel. The trick, though, is sharing intel with commercial entities is somewhat outside my scope. So we rely on foreign partners to include some people on this panel. So Oliver, maybe I'll tip that one to you. When we get intel, from a CISA perspective, what role do you take?
So CISA has a role to play per a law called CERCIA to actually inform organizations when we get threat information related to something that's going to happen on their particular private network. Okay, so if we get information from any source, by law, we're supposed to call them and let them know something's going to happen. In most cases, this is actually like ransomware events. We get information and we actually call them and let them know what's going on. I know, threat information sharing is done very well, I think, on DOD side. In the private sector, it's a lot different. Information sharing doesn't happen very well, I don't think. But we're trying to change that. I mean, CISA has something called the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative that we've actually set up to help kind of go out there to organizations, trying to bring them in and trying to get information from them, share information, get information. And, I think there's about 200 that are on that right now. It's pretty small comparatively, but it's built to grow. So we're trying to increase that over time. So that's how we're trying to do it. I mean, we also share a lot of other threat information through the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, things like that. If you're not aware of that, we put out information about real-time exploited vulnerabilities that companies have to be worried about. And if you go out there and look for the KEV, you'll see that we do that every day. Federal organizations have to remediate these as soon as we put them out, pretty much. So those are the ways we're trying to do information sharing to get it out there to all the private, public sector organizations.
So to follow up on Oliver's point about JCDC, the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, right? So one of the things that the Cyber National Mission Force does, right? As we are in contact with the adversary, defending forward, right, through our teams operating on foreign networks with foreign allies and partners to hunt advanced threats like Volt Typhoon that threaten foreign ports, right, as well as domestic critical infrastructure, is we take the information that we find with our allies and partners on their networks where we see advanced threats operating, bring it back into Cyber Command, right? Enrich it with all of the data and knowledge that we have from organizations like DODIN and their expertise with what we know from collaborating across the government, right? And with our commercial partners. So the Cyber National Mission Force operates a program that we call Under Advisement. It's the Cyber Command Executive Agent for Commercial Engagement. It sits in NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, right? And between the two of us, we have several hundred commercial partners with whom we have a bidirectional threat intelligence sharing relationship, right? So we take what we learn in foreign space, we share it out with industry, industry shares what they see through their apertures and on their networks. And then we can really build a cohesive picture of what threats are doing online to threaten our critical infrastructure or our defense industrial base, fuse that, and then share it through things like the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, right, to get it out to state and local governments, right, to get it out to network owners, and to get it back to industry, right, to get it back to the folks that operate the logistics systems that we rely on to move people and material around the world, and the cybersecurity providers that they rely on to operate and secure their networks. So it's really the power of all three of us sitting at this table, combined with the power of the National Security Agency and their ability to provide services to the defense industrial base that lets us share intel to get after some advanced threats.
And Hope, before I throw it back to you,
Yeah.
I just want to foot stomp the power of the Cyberspace Collaboration Center. It is an amazing organization, and again, when we look at global logistics, in some cases, I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but there's going to be small companies, mom and pop companies that help us with trucking or shipping or moving some of those logistics materials. Cybersecurity is not the main mission of some of those small companies. So to be able to tap into the power of the Cyberspace Collaboration Center, it is a free capability with exquisite NSA intel to help those companies. But then on the back end, it is an anonymous source that they provide. So they have called us a couple times and said, hey, DODIN, I need you to go out and fix this particular piece of your terrain because a partner has told us that there's an issue. I'm like, okay, who told you? We can't tell you who told us, just go fix it. So again, for those companies that want that kind of intelligence, these capabilities that these two organizations provide is phenomenal. So please take advantage of it. I just want to foot stomp it. Free advertisement for you guys. Jess, back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. The second question I'd like to offer the panel is, what are the primary security challenges that need to be addressed in a cloud-hosted environment? I'd like to offer this question to Mr. Hull first.
So I think that as we've gone around and hunted for threats in a variety of cloud environments, the thing that we've seen is that you've got to get the basics right? The things that make you good at running an on-prem infrastructure are the same sorts of things that make you good at operating in a cloud environment, right? Because the cloud is, right, while it's defended by the big cloud providers, it's sort of the outside of it. Inside of it, if you're reusing passwords, right? If you have poor on-prem security practices, those poor on-prem security practices just translate to the cloud. So you've got to do the basics right on-prem. The cloud isn't a magic solution. What the cloud does offer, right, is services to those smaller organizations whose core competency isn't necessarily cybersecurity, right? It might be moving packages, moving people, moving fuel, right? Where you're an expert at moving fuel, but you're not an expert at running networks that move ones and zeros. So moving your things off-prem to a cloud provider can get you the benefit of scale and mass that a cloud provider can offer, but you still got to do the basics right.
Thank you. I'd like to offer that question to Mr. Oliver.
So I think the shininess of cloud is kind of dissipated now, and you can kind of get, you know, when you first started doing cloud, you had this thought of moving from capital expense to an operational expense and then lowering costs over time, and I think that's kind of changed now in the private sector, where you're seeing them realize that it costs more over a 5-year term to do a subscription than it does to do a capital expense and keep it maybe for 5 years, maybe extend it even longer. So those type of things have actually changed. You know, you thought you could shift the responsibility for some of the security of the cloud to the vendor, and that's not all true, because I've had vendors come in and because they want to get a revenue stream, they moved something that we were using on-prem to the cloud, offer no security, no multi-factor authentication, no federated login. They don't really do security that well, but they want to trap you into this subscription model that they have. So there are a lot of challenges, and I think the federal space and DOD, you have FedRAMP and other things like that you can look to say that the cloud applications are secure. But a lot of the private sector don't have that option. When those options are 20, 30, 40% more per year, they will go with the cheaper choice all the time. So those are challenges that the private sector actually has with cloud. The thing that I think CISA is doing is this thought of secure by design. I mean, if you are in the DoD space, I think you have STIGs, right? You have to STIG everything out. You spend hours and hours of time trying to do that with these cloud applications, or your on-prem applications and all these things. CISA is trying to push that with the secure by design topic left to the vendor. Say, you should make these things secure coming out of the box, right? So they should be STIGged and ready to go out the box. You should have MFA enabled. You should have federated login capabilities. You should have all these things out of the box. And you don't provide a hardening guide, you provide a loosening guide. So if you want to risk accept not doing MFA, that's on you. You look at Snowflake, they're FedRAMPed, but they give it to the private sector. They don't enforce MFA or anything, and so you lead to things like breaches like they're having because they don't enforce those type of controls. So that's what I think CISA is trying to do, trying to let organizations know that's where we need to push these companies to be secure by designs.
Ma'am, did you want to?
I always have a comment. Of course I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, so
Yes,
if you
ma'am.
guys are playing technology word bingo, let me just let me check off a few things. So we're talking cloud, check. Zero trust, check. Machine learning, AI, alien technology, is that what you want to talk about? All right.
Alien technology.
So, okay, all the buzzwords are done. The reason I kind of make fun a little bit is because, we hear all these things. Whenever I hear cloud or mission partner environments or these other things that kind of grow and expand my DODIN, I worry about how do I defend it. I also worry about how do I train my airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marine, Coast Guardians, and my guardians and my civilians to be able to defend in this new terrain that we continue to add to the DODIN. It worries me. So, and then how do I make sure that the data that's in all of these other environments, that I can pull that data back to one platform, one area, one space where I can run all those buzzwords on it, right? Everybody loves to jump to artificial intelligence. It's based on data. And if I don't bring that data back to one place, I cannot use AI to do the defense that I need. The adversary doesn't care that I'm in Navy's network or Air Force's network. They see it as the DODIN. They don't care if it's coming from the cloud or if it's over here in the mission partner environment. It's still all part of the DODIN. So if I cannot do analytics across all of those spaces to see the adversary, they're going to hide in the gaps that we continue to create with those different elements that we tack onto the DODIN, like the cloud. So again, I always worry about how do I defend it and how do I train my people to see the data in there, see the adversary, and secure that terrain.
Thank you, ma'am. The third question I would like to offer Mr. Pandian first. What cyberspace-enabled activities can partners perform to secure global logistics activities? Over to you, sir.
So I think software is the big problem in a lot of these things. We have a lot of different software. We don't even know what we're using in some cases to protect these applications that we're actually getting. I was involved with the Move It thing, and that's because a vendor was using it, and they didn't even tell us they were using it until after they were breached from it. So having a software bill of materials is one of the first steps that you can do. You have to be able to know what you're actually trying to protect them in this entire logistics supply chain type of thing. So that's one thing that CISA is trying to make sure that we have in place, that every vendor that we are using has a software bill of materials, let us know everything, every component that they're using. I mean, you've seen things with Log4j and XZ most recently that compromise the supply chain of many software applications. And, you can trace this back to, software development practices that have changed over the years, where you had SDLC, now you have more Agile and Scrum taking place out there. You have these 2-week sprint cycles to quickly get new applications and softwares out in place. And that leaves software vulnerable. You can go out to GitHub or something like that and get some software that hasn't been vetted and put it into your code, and that leaves us all vulnerable for attack. So, those are the type of things I think CISA is trying to push for out there in the environment for, the public and private space.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, I'd like to offer that question to you as well.
Sure. So I'll take it from, again, the military perspective. So Joint Force Headquarters DODIN is what we call the coordinating authority with Transcom. So global logistics, that's massive, right? How do I scope that to something a little bit more tangible? So our focus is transportation command. And again, we can't secure everything. So knowing the mission thread, knowing what Transcom needs to be able to move X piece of equipment from base A to port B, what is the mission thread it's going to take to get there? Therefore, I can make sure that along that mission thread, I secure the key cyber terrain that supports that mission. So that then once I know that mission thread and the key cyber terrain that supports it, then I can do what I can do on the DODIN. I can go to CISA and say, hey, I need some help with these companies because they are critical to be able to moving this from point A to point B. And oh, by the way, CNMF, I may need your help in this port in a foreign country because I know that there's intel that says that port that's critical to me is possibly being targeted by the adversary. So again, it's just kind of knowing that mission thread and protecting that key cyber terrain along that path from point A to point B and using what I'll call superpowers of everybody's authority along the way.
Mr. Hull?
Yeah, so I think it's about a couple of things. So as a young captain in the 82nd Airborne Division in Afghanistan, right, like I saw the power of what on-demand real-time logistics can do, right? We were delivering ice-cold Gatorade to troops in contact out of the back of an aircraft in the middle of the desert in Sangin. And we knew that we had to deliver that cargo to that unit, right? Because we were able to communicate, right? So all of logistics relies on being able to understand what you got in inventory, right? Understand the network you're going to use to distribute it, right? And then understand the network that you're going to use to communicate with the recipient of the deliveries, right? To receive orders, to fulfill orders. So it's not just about understanding your distribution network, it's about understanding the network that you use to enable that distribution. And Heather talked about the Department of Defense aspect of it, right? But at some point, the communications that are required to make logistics happen on what we in the business sometimes call the dirty internet, right? So you got to figure out how do you secure the communications that you're using for your logistics platform as they traverse the dirty internet, right? And then how do you build systems that can recover, right? Because it's not just about keeping adversaries from reading your mail as you're placing orders. It's being confident that if your system for placing orders, your system for communicating your logistics requirements goes down, right? Are you able to bring it back up quickly? Do you have the backups in place? Do you have the rehearsed procedures to bring your system back up and give it that resiliency, right? Because what we're seeing from adversaries is that it's not just an intelligence collection problem anymore, right? The threat is really at adversaries identifying these critical vulnerabilities in our systems, right? And posturing to be able to degrade our ability to communicate in time of crisis, right? So you got to think about what are you doing in terms of investment in people and training? What are you doing in terms of investment in hardware and software all right? And then what are you doing in terms of understanding your network and the handoff points between your network and other people's networks, right, to make sure that you're resilient if something bad happens.
Thank you, panel. The last question I'll ask before I move to the audience for questions is, what does cyber resiliency mean as it relates to contested logistics and partnerships? I'd like to offer this question to General Blackwell first.
Cool.
Over to you, ma'am.
Hey, so I love General Hawk's description of resilience in his speech yesterday. He talked about the ability to anticipate, to recover, and then also to respond. I like it because it kind of spans the mission that we have at Joint Force Headquarters DODIN, right? Secure, operate, and defend. So from a resilience perspective, I need to be able to anticipate where the adversary is going to target, and secure that terrain. I also need to be able to anticipate, because remember, resilience isn't just caused by an adversary attacking a certain piece of terrain. It could also be caused by a company who chooses not to invest and upgrade their equipment, and so I have end-of-life, end-of-support equipment out there that the uptime rate of that equipment doesn't support the demands that the mission puts on it. So being able to anticipate where we're going to have failures in that terrain is a key to the resilience. Then being able to recover, kind of as you alluded to. If that system does go down from an operate perspective, if it does go down, whether it's because of an adversary or because of a mission system failure, how do I use another path to be able to get my mission done? And then lastly, how do I respond? How quickly can I bring that capability back up? Is it repatching the system? Is it rebuilding an image? Is it rerouting an entire network? Resiliency is not just one thing. It's that entire secure, operate, and defend, anticipate, recover, and respond that I think is important that we need to focus on.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to you,
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Hull. Over to you, Mr. Hull.
Yeah, so resiliency. It really is about that ability to understand what's going on your network, right? Make sure that you have the right training, the right people, the right equipment, and being able to make sense of what's going on your network, right? So we talk about Volt Typhoon as if it's like this big, super scary thing, right? The PRC doesn't have some magic zero-day wand that they're waving around, right? Living off the land is fundamentally about acting like somebody who belongs on the network, right? And using and abusing misconfigurations in the network, right? And abusing legitimate user accounts, right? Legitimate credentials to do things that you don't want your users to be able to do, right? But to do that, you've got to know who your users are. You've got to know what their normal pattern of life is, right? So that you can spot the anomalies, right? Because somebody operating in your network to do something bad is going to act, right? They're going to try to look like a normal user, but they're going to have to act a little bit differently. And this is where I think Heather's points about, right, getting data into one place where you can look at it are important, where I think there's tremendous potential for machine learning to get that data organized and groomed into a way that's usable, and potential for generative AI, right? So that you can have your network operators ask questions in English of the network, right? Rather than having to compose some incredibly complex Boolean query that nobody ever gets right because you forget one parentheses and the whole thing breaks. But be able to compose questions in English to find that anomalous behavior. Because let me tell you, like when we look for Volt Typhoon, right, we can find them and we can root them out. It's laborious, right? But it takes work, but it's not impossible, right? Where good data comes in, right? Where good training comes in, where potentially AI and machine learning comes in, is it'll let us do that at a speed and a scale that can outpace our adversaries. right? So that we're not just keeping them out now, but we're able to get ahead of them, right? And then you layer on sharing the great information that we know across the department with what CISA knows, with what we know from commercial industry, with what we know from working with allies and partners through Defend Forward operations, right? And we can really get to a place where we've got the advantage and we've got the initiative over adversaries who seek to compromise our networks. But it takes all of us to do that, right? It takes the department, it takes the commercial sector, right? It takes the state and local sector to share information, to make sure that our people are trained to common standards, to make sure that our technology is up to par, right? That we're not using old things that are end of life, that we know are being actively exploited, and then just sharing that information across the sector, right? And that's how we can make the foreign networks that we rely on reliable and resilient, and that's how we can make the domestic networks reliable and resilient.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Mr. Pandian.
Yeah, I mean, I think resilience, resilience is extremely important. And, sometimes you hope that organizations realize how they have to be resilient before they have a centennial event that triggers them to actually do something. But unfortunately, in a number of private sector organizations, it takes that event before they invest enough to protect their organization. But this is, still, you still have this concept that, it only takes one click to bring down an entire organization. I think we've seen that in the papers with a number of companies recently that, they reported that, it was just one employee that clicked something and it caused their entire network to go down. So, we have to invest in a lot of hard things. I mean, cybersecurity is not something easy, right? It's something that takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, takes money, takes expertise, and so it's going to take work on the private sector, right? We have to help them understand the threats and risks that are out there in the environment so they can react to it. So I think that's what we're all here trying to do, trying to inform everyone. I think many years ago, you couldn't talk about some of the things that we put out in publications now, like Typhoon and other things. Now it's out there. We're saying it loud and clear that we have threats and everyone needs to pay attention and do something to protect themselves. So I think that's how it'll continue to go from CISA and others in this space. We're going to keep telling everyone you need to be resilient because you may not be able to stop it, but you need to be able to recover from it.
And just to follow up on one thing that Oliver said, right? If your network security plan is relying on people to not click links in email, you've kind of already lost, right? You really need to think about how, and the networks that we've seen that are, right, that are vulnerable and the ones that we've seen that are well defended, right? You've got to think about how do you architect your network, right, in a way that assumes that your users are gonna be human, right? Like, we all click links in emails.
I haven't.
Never.
Right, but we all click links in emails, right? We all download pictures in emails, right? Like, we all do things that a sophisticated adversary could take advantage of, right? And that's, the systems are designed to let us do these things, right? It's one of the things that makes communication in the modern era possible. But you've got to invest in the network architecture that assumes that your users are going to make mistakes, right? And where you can catch adversary activity and threat activity, right? And block it, right, at the network management level, right? Because if you're relying on nobody to ever click something, life's going to be rough.
Thank you, sir. That was a very, very important message. We would like to now move to the audience for questions. Please, we'd like to ask if you can move to the microphone when you ask that question, because this session is being recorded and everyone can hear. In addition, if you can introduce yourself, that would be helpful for us as a panel. Do we have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Here we go again.
I didn't set it up.
There we go.
Testing.
Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Hi, thank you. Cora Carmody, DLH, and member of the AFCIA Cyber Committee. As a former CIO of both SAIC and Jacobs Engineering, what you say about the role of IT really, really resonates, and the importance of a good enterprise architecture. Could you talk about the ways that you bring, the muggles, the non-IT people, into the case where they know enough to be participatory? Because tech debt kills.
It does, and I love the Harry Potter reference. This is going to be fun. So, you're absolutely right. But I go back to how do we tell the story? I just came from Air Combat Command, and General Kelly was COMAC, and he would tell awesome stories about the necessity to re-wing aircraft, because if you didn't, because those wings were at end of service, end of life, you're going to put people in harm's way. How do we do that same thing? How do we tell that same story of if you don't upgrade that piece of equipment, the adversary is going to be able to use that to a horrible effect, and you are not going to be able to take that flying computer that you have called, name your 5th gen aircraft. You're not going to be able to fly that jet or sail that ship or drive that tank. That was for you, Army. There you go. Okay,
Cool.
got you. For me, it is making sure that as the IT professionals, we know the intel and the necessity to upgrade, but then we also have the ability to tell the why and tell the story to those people who rely on that equipment, so that they understand in Muggle language why it is important to upgrade that equipment. Did that answer your question?
It did, and one more example I forgot to mention. You mentioned, a one-click. A lot of people don't really know that the huge Colonial Pipeline ransomware that changed the price of gas in the economy was caused by a weak password. And so can't stress that enough.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Hey,
Oh.
Jason Miller, Federal News Network. Just I appreciated the very high-level discussion, and General Blackwell, the bingo we all love to play of cloud, zero trust, and MFA. But let me ask you to take it down one level. What are you actually doing for contested logistics and resiliency? Like, can you give me an example of an initiative, a program, something that's actually addressing the problem? Because I think we tend to talk in a lot of ethereal hypotheticals, but what's actually happening? And Oliver, I know I appreciate the SBOM, so that's a great example, but people aren't quite using that yet, so it's still real early. Secure by design, still real early. So I'll even ask CISO to go deeper than just, hey, we got to be SBOM-y, right? So anybody, all three, anybody? Thank you.
So I kind of take that as far as what CISA is doing. So you're right. It comes down to what are we actually offering people out there in industry. And CISA does offer free vulnerability scans. We do offer free pen tests. We come on site with them. My whole role in CISA to support Maryland is to go out to all of these entities. And again, this is if voluntary. I mean, we can't force ourselves on it. We're not a regulatory organization or anything like that. But if you want to have CISA come in, we'll be glad to come in and talk to your senior leadership and explain things to them in a way that they can understand. We try to bring it down. I mean, we are kind of nerds sometimes, and we talk a lot of things that maybe most people don't understand, but we can bring it down to someone, an executive's level, to give them the bullet points on what needs to be done in their organization. We can do those assessments and provide that to them. So those are some of the ways that CISA is getting out there to industry and letting them know how we can actually help if they'll let us in.
So a couple of things. Right, if you're a member of the Defense Industrial Base, a defense contractor, right, and you haven't signed up for NSA's cybersecurity collaboration centers, free services like protected DNS, I would highly encourage you to do so, right? It brings the power of the National Security Agency to you to help you defend your networks. Sharing through threat intelligence through things like Cyber Commands Under Advisement, through the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, through the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative with CISA, right, which we all play in, right, allows us to take the unique and exquisite insights that we find, right, in our operations in foreign space, right, where we see adversaries trying new things out that they might not try in the U.S., right, or using different techniques, bring that in and feed it out to right, any member of those collaboration initiatives, right? And then the Cyber National Mission Force, right, conducts about 24 defend forward operations a year, where we go out with foreign partners on foreign government networks, right, and hunt and find PRC, Russian, Iranian threats to the networks that all of us rely on, right, at the distant end for logistics, right? So at some point it moves off a DOD network, it moves onto a commercial network, and then it moves on to a foreign partner network, right? We're actively hunting, finding, and eradicating threats on foreign networks. We have hunt forward teams out today doing that across multiple geographic commands, finding threats, helping allies identify what they need to do to plug the holes in their networks and evict those threats, and then bringing that information back, right, and feeding it to partners in industry, partners across the government.
So from a DoD information network perspective, so you asked about what specifics are you doing? It's a great question because sometimes it's hard in this environment, right? We are in an unclassified environment with cameras everywhere, people everywhere, and so being able to, again, tell a story in this environment is not always the easiest. But I have a good example for you that actually happened last week. And I think the public affairs article is coming out soon, Steve, on our Global Logistics Summit. So last week, Cyber Command and Transportation Command, so Cybercom and Transcom, co-led a Global Logistics Summit here at Cyber Command, where General Skinner and the Deputy Commander for Transcom went through multiple vignettes, went through multiple mission threads of what Transcom requires to do their mission. And again, it was, you had Air Force, you had Army, you had Navy, all of our service components there looking at those key systems that are required to be able to do that transportation mission. We then overlaid on top of Transcom's campaign plan, our cyber campaign plan that says if you want that terrain to be secure, if you want that mission thread to be able to execute, given the fact that you've shown us what those key systems are, we know that there's intel going after that system. Let's patch that one. So now, following the Global Logistics Summit, we have some action items that we're going after, whether it is to do another tabletop exercise and make sure that we really have that mission thread secure, both from a cyber resiliency perspective, but also other perspectives within Transcom. Another area that we took out of that Global Logistics Summit was the power of two COCOMs coming together to look at global logistics is awesome. So how can we have both of those combatant commanders, General Van Ovost and General Hawk, going into the Pentagon with the same budget approach that says, Pentagon, I need you to fund this particular system because it's critical to Transcom, but it's also a key cyber terrain for Cyber Command. So being able to align those areas where we advocate for budgets between two COCOMs is another thing that came out of the Global Logistics Summit that is coming out next week. And I got the thumbs up from PA that a better summary of that summit will come out. If you want more questions, Hulk actually ran that summit and pulled everybody together. So I know that she would love to talk to you after on some other details that I probably missed about the Global Logistics Summit. But again, that's just one aspect of the things that we're trying to get after from that perspective. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, ma'am, for that support. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Well, we would like to thank each and every one of you for attending our Contested Logistics Partnering to Win panel. I'd like to thank our outstanding panel today for their time, insight, and perspective. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this panel discussion and look forward to partnering with each of you to win. We would like to also advocate for sharing some of these free programs mentioned today with those smaller companies that aren't really focused on cybersecurity that are inside of the logistical industry. So if you could do that, that'd be wonderful. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.